In depth now. It took 2 days to get the largest fire in Madison's history under control. 8 days to put the entire thing out. Only News 3 taking you back 20 years tonight to a moment in Madison's history many will never forget.
And it would become known as the Butter Fire and spark changes in how the Madison Fire Department prepares for major incidents. The Night Team's David Douglas has the story tonight.
The fire is legend not just because of the blaze itself, but because of the mess it made. A scene which began unfolding on the city's east side on the afternoon of May 3rd, 1991. Looking back 20 years isn't all that hard for Gordy Berggren.
We didn't think we were going to see the volume of fire.
The Madison fire lieutenant easily remembers the biggest fire he's ever seen.
I think all of us were kind of shocked.
This is News 3 at 6.
It is being described as the worst fire in Madison's history.
Madison firefighters are battling a huge multi-alarm fire.
It's a maze, and they got a lot of combustibles, and you got a lot of heat.
Wow, disaster.
Oh, it's massive. I mean, this wind is blowing this baby. It's big time. It's a big loss for a lot of people in the city of Madison.
The blaze became known as the Great Madison Butter Fire, but when Berggren and others first arrived on the scene, there was only smoke, and no one seemed to know exactly what was burning.
What's on the other side of that? I don't know.
I think it was about the next day we found out that it was butter. Once it started to come out, it literally came out in gushes. I mean, just like a dam opened up.
A literal river of butter, disgusting to look at, difficult to slog through, and firefighters were in it for days.
And as the moon broke through the billowing smoke at dawn, it marked the beginning of another day of the battle against one of the city's worst industrial fires.
We leave on Tuesday, come back on Thursday, and it's still on fire.
It's like a football field of flames.
Retired Assistant Fire Chief Fred Kinney was in command the day the central storage warehouse started burning when a forklift battery shorted out. Tucked in the corner between Stoughton and Cottage Grove roads, the cold storage facility sprawled across more than 200,000 square feet.
We knew in advance that it was a building that wasn't structurally sound. It was just kind of a shell building that they kept refrigerated products in. So we didn't want to get anybody inside.
It was the right move. It didn't take long before the first wall came thundering down.
Smoke, flames came flying up into the air, and I'm like, wow. It was one of those moments in news where you go, we're on a pretty big story here.
This is a massive complex, and at this moment it is ablaze.
Joel Despain, who spent 25 years at News 3, was the first reporter on the story.
At that point, we had no idea this was going to be a story that had legs that would go on for a couple of months.
But as the 20 million pounds of stored butter burned, essentially turning the warehouse into a giant deep fryer on fire, the problems grew. The DNR had to build a dam before any of the nasty concoction could get into the lakes. And at one point, the neighborhood was evacuated for fear an anhydrous ammonia tank could explode.
As a firefighter, you want to go and put the fire out. And when you can't put the fire out, it becomes this exercise in, I don't know, you feel like you're not getting your job done.
At times, the job felt impossible, with all the liquefied butter, cheese, and lard always in the way.
So the rigs got stuck. There was no moving the rigs once that butter came out.
Berggren found himself in an even deeper mess.
When I was following a line back, I slipped into a hole that was roughly up to my neck, and it was all butter.
And to see it starting to come tumbling down was pretty amazing and scary.
It was just last year a central storage and warehouse company finally finished rebuilding every last square foot.
Rather scary for a while, not knowing.
Jack Williams is the company's vice president of operations. He remembers his dad, the owner, facing millions in losses, considering bankruptcy.
Through litigation and the final settlement, we ended up being able to stay open and expand.
With the firefight long over, it's a little easier to look back and laugh at the inferno of ingredients.
The hot dogs literally exploded out of the back end of that once that front roof collapsed. I mean, there were guys that were running backwards and getting passed up by cases of hot dogs.
For this fire lieutenant, it's plain to see what the city learned.
I think the conditions right now for us, in my 23 years here, are some of the best I've ever worked under. 20-some years ago, we were short-staffed.
But perhaps even more importantly, what he'll never forget from a fire, never to be forgotten.
You pass these stories on, you pass these tips on, because learning it on the job is hazardous.
Isn't that just absolutely incredible? The fire resulted in nearly $100 million in property and product loss. It was also one of the most expensive fires the city had ever fought, and one of the reasons was when it was all said and done, it was impossible to get the butter out of all of the turnout gear. It all had to be replaced and was done so ×2. So every firefighter would have a spare set. By today's prices, that would cost about $400,000, and that's not even the whole story because they did it for all the other agencies who provided mutual aid who also had gear that was basically ruined.
A lot of people hearing about this fire, I'm sure, that have moved to Madison since then, learning about it tonight. Now, the fire department, they had to learn a ton from this.
One of the things they say is that they really learned a lot about how to train and educate themselves better about target hazards, their words, for specific sites with the real potential to pose a big problem. And quite frankly, it's a testament to the fire prevention and education efforts done in the city by the folks down at the fire department that we haven't had more large fires for a city our size.
No kidding. Great job. News 3's David Douglas. Interesting story.